Welcome to episode 169 of the Forward from 50 podcast, where we interview people over 50 who are pursuing new direction for their lives. It's an opportunity for men and women to tell their stories, their way, and in their own words. I'm Greg Gerber, the founder of Forward from 50, and your host for today's show. Today I'm joined by Aaron Hunt. He's a former engineering executive who walked away from a successful corporate career to pursue something much simpler and, as it turns out, much more meaningful. Aaron thought that he might just want to spend his time fishing, but what started out as a way to reconnect with something he has loved to do evolved into a YouTube channel, a growing audience, and even his own line of American-made fishing rods. In this conversation, Aaron shares what that journey has taught him about freedom, identity, and building a life he actually wants to live. Here are a few key takeaways from my conversation with Aaron. First, sometimes the things we loved as kids aren't hobbies. Rather, they're clues as to who we really are. Second, pursuing freedom after 50 is not about doing it nothing. Instead, it's about choosing what matters and letting go of everything else. Third, you don't need permission or perfect timing to start something new. You just need to begin and stay consistent. Finally, when you follow your passion authentically, you may end up inspiring others in ways you never expected. To tell us more about his shift from corporate life to fishing, please welcome Aaron Hunt to the show. Thanks for joining me today, Aaron. I really appreciate it. I love it that your friends and family members told you specifically you can't go fishing all the time, and you set out to prove them wrong. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I don't know if I set out to prove them wrong, but when I left the corporate world a little over 5 years ago, the only thing I wanted to do was to go fishing because I felt like I hadn't had a chance to do that much over the last 10 years. And so I did have a lot of friends tell me, like, you can't just go fishing, like you need to do something else. But the funny thing is about a year and a half later, I started a YouTube channel about fishing, and that led to me having my own line of American-made fishing rods. And so now the running joke is like, maybe you can just go fishing. But I feel like I do a lot of other things too. It's just fishing is the nucleus of the things that I try to make sure that I get done on a regular basis.
What did you do as a career before you jumped into fishing?
Essentially, I was in engineering leadership. It was operational efficiency, so how to grow companies. One of the things that I got into early on, I realized that what I was learning was how to grow companies to the point where they had to hire more people. And so back in the 90s, I'm like, hey, I can actually create jobs with this. And so that was really what drove me. And I worked in about 6 different industries over my career. And one of the things we would start getting into and what would prompt me to leave is certain types of leaders would come in and like they want to improve profitability by cutting jobs. So that was completely against the way I worked. And so once we had a certain level of success, sometimes they'd get a little greedy and I'd be like, okay, I'm out of here. And I'd go work for somebody else. So it led me through a lot of different industries. I think I worked in 31 states and 12 countries over the course of my career. So that reluctance to reduce work for the American worker led me to a lot of other opportunities. And some people say maybe I'm impatient or I needed to compromise a little bit more at times, but I think it worked out well.
I think you left at just the right time because 5 years ago, AI wasn't making the impact it is now. And now it's eliminating jobs like a thresher on a wheat field. It's just crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know how I would handle it in the corporate world at this point, but 2020 was a crazy year and things were changing and I was basically put on hold. And my wife had said, you know what, you always said when you get to a certain investment level, you could just leave. And we're past that. Just leave. Go do your own thing. And so it was nice to have her kind of pushing me almost. And because I probably was getting a little burnout at that point.
I think that happens to a lot of folks when they get to 50. They realize that the career they've had just doesn't have the draw that it did in the past and that they built put their ladder on the wrong wall and eventually climb to the top and they look around and they say, what else is there? And they find out it's nothing.
Yeah, it's funny because I had changed careers a couple times into different industries thinking, this will be different. And I started in electronics. I got into heavy power. I was in medical device. I was in railway. I was in commercial power delivery. I jumped into healthcare at the end of my career thinking like, that's got to be radically different than anything else I've done. But the fundamental thing is what it comes down to is the people. And whether a company was radically successful or whether they just survived came down to the quality of leadership and their willingness to change some of the opinions that they had and some of that perspective that they knew was right, even when they would be shown that it's not right. When they weren't willing to change, that kind of created the impasse. And every business ended up being pretty much the same script. And it got a little boring for me after 25 years.
I can imagine. So you decided to start something new. Had you done fishing as a way to escape the pressures of corporate life for many years?
Yeah, I grew up on the Ohio River. And so my earliest memories are fishing with my grandmother and cousins and stuff like that. So fishing to me was always like one of the core things that was about who I was. And I really felt like over a 10-year period, I had given some of that up because of the demands of corporate life. And the higher you go in the corporate ladder, the more demands there are on your time. And it felt like it was tough to squeeze in fishing even, it seems crazy, but that's where I had gotten to. And so that was part of why it was just like, I need to reconnect with a couple of things that I know or who I am, because I definitely felt like at least the last 10 years of my career, I had to assume a little bit of a persona in order to create corporate change, right? And to change a culture. Like there are certain ways you have to behave, and there are certain phrases you have to say. There are certain things that you have to do to get people to change, because certain parts of things people don't want to change until they're 100% sure it's going to be better. And so I had to have a different look. I was always in a suit. I was always polished. So fishing was just one of those things. There's nobody there to judge me. I knew I could just unplug. And so that's really what I started with. It was just a way to try to refresh before I figured out what I wanted to do next.
I've known you for a couple of years, and I remember you were reluctant to leave that corporate world to pursue this other opportunity. What was holding you to that? Was it the fear of the unknown or the income problem that you might have?
Yeah, for me, it was the income side. They say when you retire in your late 40s, right, you're giving up possibly your highest earning decade ever. And so I definitely had a number that we were trying to get to, and we were right at that number. I wasn't 100% sure that I had enough money in brokerage accounts versus retirement. And you get to the point where it's just a little bit more would be a little bit more comfortable. And my wife's been going through that the last few years. She's just now getting ready to retire. And it's been some of that same debate. It's okay, there's healthcare costs, there's all this other stuff. I think that was part of it. And there was also a little part of, there was still more I thought that I wanted to achieve. And honestly, if 2020 didn't work out the way it did for the world, I probably would have worked a few more years, because we were working on some really amazing things. And then it just all came to a screeching halt. And when I realized it was going to be at least 18 months of just essentially getting paid to do next to nothing, it didn't sit well with me. And so I had to find something else.
That's neat that you had that safety net kind of with your wife still employed and bringing in an income. So there wasn't as much pressure as just leaving everything and jumping in full time into a new venture. But how long did it take you to build this to the point that you started seeing some results?
I didn't jump right into YouTube. So I had a photography business on the side when I was still in the corporate world. And so the first thought was like, I'm going to build up my photography business. And that started working out well. And I got some nice recurring clients. But then I started like mapping out, like, what's this look like when I'm fully booked? And it was basically the answer was like, I might have 3 or 4 weeks off a year. I'm basically creating another job for myself. And I didn't want to do that. My wife and I talked about it, and we said, okay, let's pivot to something else. And so just at the meantime, that was around 2022, and the stock market was just taking a beating that year. So I'm like, okay, we can't take anything out of investments right now. So I need to make some money somehow. So I started selling on eBay, which I'd done on and off over the years. I'd done Amazon FBA to help retire early. So I didn't mind the hustle. And then after about a year of that, I was pulling in pretty nice money on eBay. And I started thinking, like, could I build this into $200,000 a year or $250,000 a year? I started thinking about getting employees. And I'm like, wait a minute, like you're not supposed to be working this hard. So I started the YouTube channel basically to take some of my time away from selling on eBay. And so I said, if I can be accountable to YouTube, then it'll limit the number of hours that I can go into this storage unit that I'd set up operations in and be in there selling mostly clothing and watches.
It's go ahead.
No, go ahead.
It sounds very similar to the story that I've heard a couple of times repeated about the guy who's out fishing and he's just hauling in a bunch of fish and he goes home after a couple of hours and the business executive bumps into him and says, "Man, you're missing an opportunity. You could buy more fishing boats." The guy's, "For what?" "Then you'd have more fish and you'd have to hire more employees and build more locations and things like that." And he goes, "For what?" "So you can have more and more." And the bottom line was, and at the end, you can retire and go fishing. And he's like, why go through all of that when I could do that now?
Exactly. And that's kind of what the challenge has been for me over the last 5 years is how do I do things that keep me engaged, that keep me feeling like I'm contributing to society, but doesn't limit my freedoms. Because I feel like I worked really hard, my wife and I both, we worked really hard to be in a situation where we could essentially buy our freedom back at a younger age. And so what I don't want to do is just create another job for myself that I have to figure out how to take time off. The last several years, it's been like, hey, if I want to go spend a week with my dad, I can. But if somebody asks us to go somewhere tomorrow, we can go within reason. And that we'll be able to do even more of that in the next few months once my wife quits working. Yeah, I think it's a challenge when you've been really successful in your career and you've built all kinds of things over a few decades. Like, how do you get to the point where you do something that doesn't tie you into what looks like a job? And that's really been the most interesting and challenging part for me is how do I generate income that lets me do the things above and beyond day-to-day life? Maybe some of the crazy fishing trips or cool cars or whatever it is, watches. I love watches. So how do I do those kind of things with what my wife calls stupid money, right? Which is my side business money. That's what allows us to live what I'd like to think is going to be an extra special retirement, rather than just people who they retired early and we got to that financial independence level and then we just retreated into our own shell. I'd rather do things where we're still interacting more with other people, maybe setting examples for younger people in my family and other people to aspire to be like, that's how I'd like to live. And so I think that's a big part of what's driving me at this point.
I've used fishing as an example of what people can do for purpose in a long time because it's a dream of a lot of people to retire and just go fishing all day. But after a while, they become bored to tears going out there and doing that because they're not making an impact on anyone. So I have said, if you like to go fishing, then you can turn your hobby into a purpose by encouraging other people to fall in love with fishing, teaching them how to do that, what equipment to use, what bait to use, the strategies for catching fish and things like that. Now you're imparting your knowledge on other people, and that can be a really tremendous draw when it comes to purpose.
Yeah, and honestly, my first few videos were just documenting that feeling of freedom. But when I really started doing YouTube a little bit more consistently and focused was when I got into this style of fishing called bait finesse. And at the time, there were virtually no videos in English on this style. And so I'm like, I'm just going to document my journey of somebody who's fished for a certain type, fished a certain way over my life to now pick up this new style. And that was really the intent. It wasn't to be like, hey, I'm going to try to make a little bit of money or whatever. It was almost just like the idea of a vlog, right? Because when I've written my personal blogs back started 10 or 15 years ago, I love to be able to look through some of those old posts to remember what I was going through and what life was like back in 2012 or whatever. And so that was the idea behind the YouTube channel, was just to document my progression through this and the things that I learned along the way. And within a month or two, all of a sudden I started having people follow. And I remember it took about a month and a half, and all of a sudden I went from 0 subscribers or 5 or something like that, were basically like friends and former coworkers, to 86 all of a sudden, it seemed like. And I'm like, ooh, okay, like I need to make videos for these people. And it's been a fun journey, and but it isn't something I don't think it's something that's ever really going to pay the bills, but it does two really good things for me, other than just getting out and encouraging me to see new places. One is, it does pay for my fishing gear. So it's almost like all of the fancy gear that I want is free. And so as somebody retired early, to be able to underwrite that is fantastic. The other side of it is it does make a lot of our travel legitimately pre-tax, because if I'm filming videos, if I'm meeting with manufacturers or other YouTubers and we're doing content, then a lot of the travel actually has a legal business sense. Last year, I think I actually made a profit even with all of that. So it's not like there's no money, but it's nothing compared to what I used to make.
I can imagine. What is bait finesse? I've never heard of that before.
So bait finesse is essentially and the purists they crucify me when I say this, but it's essentially ultralight bait casters. So the kind of things that you would typically think people would throw for trout or on what's ultralight, very light rods, it uses a bait caster style that has a shallow spool. I just find it to be amazingly enjoyable. It's more efficient. It's easier to use once you get used to it, because it's just so well balanced. And it's just, to me, I loved fishing before. And then once I found this, I'm like, oh, this is incredible. It's when you think you like wine and then you have a really great wine, you're like, oh, I never knew it could be this good. It was that moment for me. I'm like, oh, this is going to change my life, I think. So, which is why I decided to start documenting.
So by documenting it and sharing those videos, you're teaching other people about what this type of fishing is like, or style.
Yeah, and a lot of my videos are also based around the gear, because you're buying, most of the gear comes from China or Japan, and some of it's not cheap. And I'm in a position, especially as the YouTube started picking up, like I can just keep buying some of the better stuff and some of the new stuff, and I can do my reviews on it. And I get a lot of people who thank me for, hey, this helps me because I don't have the money to buy 5 reels.
Right.
And so knowing that this one for $100 is just as good as most of the $200 reels, that's a big deal for them. And so it is nice to get those kind of messages and stuff like that.
Do you make your own gear as well?
I don't make my own gear, but about 1.5 years into my journey, I did have an American manufacturer reach out to me and said, hey, could you help us design a line of American-made bait finesse rods? And I said, yeah, sure. At first, honestly, it was one of those moments where I've had them a few times in my career where somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, do you want to talk to us? And so this was a bait manufacturer who had done some custom lures for me for a workshop that I did. And like a week after that workshop, he called and said, hey, would you want to work with Kistler custom rods? I'm like, oh yeah, sure, that'd be great. And he's like, I'm serious. They're looking for somebody to help design some rods, and you came to mind. So he connected us, and after about 1.5 hours on the phone with Trey Kistler, he was like, yeah, you're the guy I want to work with. He's, let's start figuring this out. And in that conversation, we got to the end, and he's like, so what do you want? And I'm like, I want the rods that I've always wanted to fish with, but I can't find. And he's like, no, what else do you want? And I really didn't have any answers. And so he started throwing out a couple things, and he's like, you want free rods? I'm like, oh, yeah, that'd be nice. And he's, do you want a signature fishing rod? I'm like, oh, that would be amazing. So as a kid who grew up fishing and watching some of these pros on TV that ended up with their own stuff, I'm like, man, that would be almost like a dream come true. And when we got to the end of the design process, he said, man, these things are so different than anything else on the market. You've really come up with something amazing. And I said, yeah, we talked about a signature rod. Like this model would probably be the one that I'd fish the most. He's like, how about we just name them all after you? And I'm like, really? And he was like, yeah, I don't see why not. And so I ended up with my own line of American-made fishing rods, which are by far the best fishing rods I've ever fished. And they've spoiled me. I don't do as many fishing rod videos as I should because I haven't found anything to stack up to these. And they are expensive. They're a premium piece of gear. And that's the only knock that people usually have about them. Is, yeah, I wish they weren't $350. I'm like, I get that. But sometimes you got to pay for that level of performance. And they have been amazing. So that was a really unexpected situation. But I don't have the patience to craft lures and stuff like that. And honestly, I will say that my eyes are not as good as they were before. And so even sometimes just trying to tie knots is tough. And so I'm not going to put all that extra pressure on trying to make stuff. So
you got some pushback from people when you started having your signature line of rods who thought that you didn't deserve it. They didn't know you very well, or I bought the rods and called them your own.
Yeah, probably my favorite 2 comments so far over the almost 3 years now that those rods have been out One guy was like, obviously, you just paid a ton of money to be able to put your name on these rods. I'm like, no, that's not what it is whatsoever. Like, I don't think that I'm that self-centered that I'd be like, oh, hey, I'm going to waste some of my money just to get my name on a fishing rod. So it was just crazy. It's obvious somebody that doesn't know me. But even just recently, I had somebody said, who is this dude? Fishing companies are just putting anybody's name on their fishing rods at this point. And I had a little bit of fun with that one. I went really deep on that guy. I'm like, okay, here's who I am, and talked about my 25 years of engineering background and all this stuff. And never got a response from him. But yeah, there are people that are like, oh, whatever happened. I will admit that I think I'm very fortunate and I'm blessed to be in that situation. A couple things happened. I was willing to lead a workshop in Florida, and I went to find, actually, it was our mutual friend Vincent who encouraged me, you need to create like an artifact, something that people can only get at that event so that they'll always remember it. And I'm like, okay. So I got some custom lures made, and when the guy that I ended up getting the lures made from is on Kistler's pro staff, and he was getting into bait finesse. And so when Trey reached out to him, he's, no, not me, but I know a guy. And it turns out Trey and I are about the same age. We've got similar backgrounds. We've both very strong faith background. And so it just felt like a good fit. The whole deal is just, it's been on a handshake, and a virtual handshake at that. We've never met in person yet. But there have been so many people that have speculation on how this happened. And the answer is you create good content, you be honest, you deal directly and truthfully with people. And sometimes these kind of opportunities happen. It's the old saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get. So.
That's right. I love your website because there's a line on there that just encapsulates everything that I think makes you successful. I create the fishing content I want to enjoy. It's what you enjoy doing it. So you enjoy making the content to help other people. And if they get benefit, that's a double benefit to do that.
Yeah, I did take a little bit of a break because I felt like I was starting to get sucked in by making content that I thought the algorithm wanted or that might generate more money. But I felt it. And honestly, I bet you some of my viewers felt it. But this goes back to working with Trey Kistler and Kistler Custom Rods. They were 100% behind that. When I said, hey, I need to take a break, and here's why. I want to focus on myself. I want to focus on my family and my friends. And they're like, yeah, dude, you have your priorities right. Like, they weren't worried about it at all. And so when I came back this spring, they're like, hey, this is great. Whatever you want to do is what you want to do. It's not, you're doing things right. And they feel really good about that. Yeah, I'm trying to be a little bit more focused and do the things that I know most of them aren't going to be the best performing videos, but they are going to get closer back to why I originally started, which is to just document the journey.
Okay, that makes sense. Did you have to learn anything in order to start this platform, or is it just something that came naturally to you?
Yeah, honestly, I think anybody could start YouTube. Now, I did have some advantage because I had a photography background and took some classes at Pittsburgh Film School back in 2012, 2013, when I was actually still shooting film in my cameras. I produced a lot of videos for training purposes over the last 10 or 15 years of my career. So I was already doing a little bit of video editing. So I think there was a little bit of an advantage that I had there, but so many other people grow much faster on YouTube than I did. I think it's something that is easy to do. I actually think that anybody who is still working, they should be doing YouTube for their subject matter because, as you mentioned earlier, AI, the way it's really changing everything, the only difference is going to be the personal side that you can bring to things at times. And by creating a personal brand through sharing your expertise on some place like YouTube, it could set you apart. It could be one of the differentiators for people. And so I think it's great. And the easiest way to learn how to do YouTube is to start doing YouTube. Like my first probably 10 or 15 videos are absolutely horrible. You learn, and you're like, okay, why can't I figure out how to do this? Oh, I need to change the settings on the camera, or I need to do I need to do this, or I need to learn how to do this technique in editing. But you don't know what you don't know until you start doing it. And the barrier to entry is practically zero. And so it really wasn't that hard at all.
That's right. I think a lot of people are fearful of doing this and jumping into something like YouTube because they think they're going to create a video that's going on the internet and millions of people are going to see it. The algorithms don't work that way. Go ahead.
If you're really good, millions will see it. And so that's the only way that millions are going to see it. But honestly, probably for your first month or two at least, nobody cares. Nobody's even going to see it. You'll be lucky if 10 people see your first few videos starting off from
Exactly.
the beginning. So it's I don't know, but and even if people do see it, who cares? Their opinions do not affect you whatsoever. We need to have the courage to do what it is that we want to do and say what we want to say and go from there.
Did you have any training or have to take any training to learn how to do this?
No, they're
No?
not at all. Again, I have a little bit of background at film school, but that was more around setting exposure for film and developing film. Maybe some of the creativity that I do might have stemmed from some of those classes and instructors to make me think a little bit differently. But everything that this is weird, but everything really that I've needed to learn to do YouTube better, I learned on YouTube.
YouTube certified, right?
Yeah, so it's all there. And even like today, there's a technique that I'm doing in a video that I'm finishing up later today that I've done before, but I can't remember because it's been a while. And so I'll just go to YouTube, like, how do you do this? And I'll find that little 1.5 minute video that tells me how to change the shape of this thing, and I'll be good to go.
That's awesome. Did it require a big financial investment for you to launch a platform of your own?
I wouldn't say it required it. And again, I already had some gear that is more expensive than most people start with. But for YouTube starting out, you can start with just your phone. If you have a phone that's made in the last 10 years, the camera is probably better than what I started with 5 years ago because I had an old action cam that I started with. I eventually built a blog to go with the YouTube channel. And I think that cost me like maybe $20 to get started. So it's really not that much at all. And I spend a little bit more on the blog at this point just for a little bit better hosting and stuff like that. But I think that's the amazing thing about social media in general is whatever platform you want to choose, the barrier to entry is almost zero. The question is, can you be disciplined enough to actually do it on a consistent basis?
Consistency, that's the key.
And so like right now, I'm in the rebuilding the trust with YouTube because I took that extended break. So I have what I hope is going to be a really good video that's about ready to be published, but I'm still going to wait a couple weeks just to make sure that the algorithm is fully warmed up and I'm back into that mid-tier trust level of, okay, yeah, we can send a bunch of traffic to this guy because his videos he's back, essentially, is what it is. But I think I got maybe 2 more weeks of rewarming up my viewers and stuff, and I'll be good to go.
Okay. What rewards have you received from pursuing this passion?
I think a couple of things. One, as I touched on before, like just the opportunity to have my name on a fishing rod. That's just, I wouldn't even let myself dream that, to be honest with you. But so to be able to have that, and it's here for forever. Obviously, eventually the rod will not be made, but I'll still have them. And so and most of my friends and family have them too, right? So that's a really cool thing. I think it has forced me to, maybe forced isn't the right word, but it's encouraged me to go fish a lot of other places that I wouldn't have fished before. I probably at this point have now caught 19, 20, 21 personal best fish since I started really getting into YouTube. And the most recent one just on Monday, it has allowed me to almost the permission to drive a little bit farther or to fish a little bit longer or to go to places that I've always heard of, but I never really went to. And now I got to have those experiences. But I think the most important thing for me is when it doesn't happen all the time, but like with friends and their kids or my nieces and nephews, they are just amazed like that Uncle Aaron or Aaron is actually like doing these things. And it's been, like every once in a while I sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace or whatever. And the last thing that I sold was this one fishing rod that I just didn't use anymore. It wasn't one of mine. And the lady sent, after we made arrangements to meet, she sent me a text and she's, my son is convinced that this is you. And she had one of my videos. And I'm like, yeah, that's me. She's, do you mind if I bring him to meet you? And I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And so we talked for 10 or 15 minutes. I gave him a bunch of extra free gear because I want to encourage kids. And he was like, you don't know how much this means to me. I gave him 2 rods instead of just the one. And he was like, wait until my friends hear that I'm like, I don't have that many subscribers for somebody to know who I am. You know?
Exactly.
But the idea that I can encourage and inspire kids or even other people, that's probably the unexpected benefit. This was just something that I wanted to do for myself. And it does have an impact on other people, which is nice.
I think that what you'd said about being an example to your nieces and nephews, that's spot on as well, because now they know that they can do it as well because you've led the way. You showed them that this is possible, that you don't have to be in a dead-end corporate job for the rest of your life, that you can pull off and do things that you're really passionate about, but it will take time and consistency to get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. The idea that we all have to work until we're 65 or 70 or whatever retirement age is. I never wanted to do that from the beginning. When I was 18, I'm like, I'm retiring by the time I'm 55. But I didn't necessarily know how to do that. But today, the opportunity to create income in other ways just by pursuing your passions it's at a level that we've never seen before. And in some ways, AI will help people do that faster. We even talked a little bit like AI essentially helps you do the editing of your podcasts a little bit faster, right? And so I do think that while there is this potential fear of what AI is going to do to the workplace, I think at the same time, it opens up workplaces that we don't even think about right now. And while some people might think YouTube is saturated, I think it might be just the beginning at this point. And it could replace almost all of TV in the near future.
That's probably very accurate. So now you're focusing on producing videos that are more how-to. When you go fishing, you're not like guiding other people to fishing spots and helping them with the lures. You're doing everything online.
Yeah. I don't do any guiding or anything like that. And actually, I go so far as most of my videos, I don't even name the locations that I'm going to. There's this thing called spot burning in fishing. And so if it's a big major river or lake, then maybe I'll say, okay, I'm fishing this. But otherwise, sometimes I have pet names for them. Like I have the Haunted Lake, I have the Test Lake, those are a couple that come to mind. Gilligan's Island is another spot. So I'm not telling you where to go fish, but I do try to at least share a little bit of tips. Like even in the video I'm editing now, I was fishing a new stretch of stream. So I'm like, hey, here's a tip to find some fishing spots. When you see that other people have pulled off the path, right, whether it's their car or they're walking off the established path to go down to the water, there's probably a lot of people who have done that. That's why you can see the path. There's probably good fishing down. And so it's a little thing that I've picked up over the years. But almost every time you see a defined path, there's a reason.
Yeah, you do not want to be telling people where you fish and have 10,000 people show up and start fishing that same stream or lake.
Yeah, even the place that I was fishing last week is I don't know, I almost call it semi-famous. There's always plates from out of state when I show up there. And there had to have been maybe 75 people that I saw across the 4 miles or so of this stream. And so I was forced to find some new spots, but because I don't like to fish beside people, I just, fishing is for me to get out there for the most part. If I'm going with a friend, it's one thing, but just to try to battle against other anglers, I'm not going to do that. And it made me find a couple really big fish that I otherwise probably would have completely missed. So
if you could roll the clock back, is there anything you'd do differently?
Other than keeping that hard drive that had Bitcoin on it from 2010, yeah. No, I try to live without many regrets whatsoever. I don't think I would change that much at this point. Most of those decisions that I made led me to where I am today. Even with YouTube, like I could say maybe I should have gone harder at it, but maybe I just would have burned out faster. So I'm happy with the way it is. Do I wish I made 6 figures from YouTube? I can't even say yes to that because there's a certain level of responsibility that comes when you're at that level. And I don't know that I want my life to look that way.
I understand that celebrity, it comes with fame, but fame causes you to lose a lot of anonymity as well. And that's exactly right. It sounds like there's a story about Bitcoin here, and you got to refresh my memory what this one's all about.
I haven't shared it with a lot of people, but so right around the time I really got serious about investing just in mutual funds instead of trying to pick stocks and all that stuff. 2007 was pretty brutal for some of us that were into the market. And I just made all the wrong decisions through that financial crisis. I didn't buy the things that I wanted to buy because I didn't have confidence. So I was getting into like more boring investments, but it's what allowed me to retire. But I started reading about this Bitcoin stuff. And at the time, it really didn't even have a value. It was in the pennies. And so I actually started mining Bitcoin. And this would have been in early 2009. And after about 4 or 5 months, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to stop this because I think I'm spending more in electricity than I'm actually getting in Bitcoin. So I don't remember how much I had, but this even predates like online wallets. Like all of your wallets were on the hard drive at that point. And so it wasn't until around 2019 when it first hit 60 some thousand or something like that. And everybody started talking about Bitcoin again. When I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I have that old hard drive. And what I found out was I have saved every hard drive since that one, but I didn't have that one. I still had the password and everything written down. So it was like I could have gotten it. So I don't know how many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars that was that went into a landfill. But hey, it's so again, that might be the only thing I would have changed.
That would be a crushing story. My goodness. Maybe you'll find it again someday. And you'll be like,
no, I'm convinced that there's this part of my memory that says, no, I actually physically destroyed that computer and smashed the hard drive because I kept it so long that it really wasn't worth even donating to anybody. I think I had bought it in 1995 and we got rid of it in like 2012 or 13. So just to put it in perspective, like it was ancient, but it was the one that I had used to mine Bitcoin. So
I remember having everything that I had written, like even from college days, photos of my daughters when they were little on an external hard drive. And one day I reformatted it and it says, there's data on this drive. Are you sure you want to do that? And I said, yeah, I know what it is. Go ahead. And it reformatted it. And I lost decades of information. It was like a gut feeling that, oh my gosh, I'll never get this stuff back. So I feel your pain.
I kind of lamented that for maybe about a week. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Everything else is working pretty good. I'm like, I wasn't meant to have it. That's all there is to it. So,
is there any advice you would give to people over 50 to help them either identify or pursue their passions?
Yeah, there was a book that actually really unlocked a lot for me. So the fishing is one piece of it. Travel is another piece, and I'm incorporating that into my YouTube channel a little bit more. As I mentioned earlier, I'm into watches, and honestly, watches probably generate more income for me than anything else. But there was a book by Brant Menswar called Black Sheep. And the idea of that book is that black sheep's wool cannot be dyed. It cannot be changed. And there are certain key things about us that have largely always been true. And so when I went through that, read that book, went through the exercises, there were certain things that came out. Fishing was one of them. And I had read that book before I quit working. And so that was one of the things where I'm like, I want to go fishing. I need to reconnect with that part of me. But that book to me is one of the greatest things to help you find what it is you truly should be pursuing. It's not just, oh, hey, this is a good idea because it's trendy. No, this is who you've been since you were a child. And then you start thinking about how could I make these kind of things work? And that's been a large part of what I've been trying to do is how do I take the things that I love, the things that make my life feel fulfilling, make a little bit of money from it, but then don't look like or feel like I'm working. Right? That's like the whole recipe that I'm trying to figure out right now. This year, I'm putting a little bit more focus on my health just because last week I walked 15 miles when I was fishing. Monday was 7 miles. And I started realizing like I'm maybe not in the kind of shape that I really want to be in to continue to do that long term. So I am focused on that. But yeah, Brant Menswar's book, Black Sheep, that I think would be a great resource to help people figure out what they want to do if they don't already know. And I'll also throw in that his audiobook version of that is one of the best audiobooks I have ever heard. It's incredible. There's so much production value put into the audiobook. It makes it a very enjoyable listen as well.
Excellent. Thank you for the recommendation. So how can people connect with you if they would like to follow you and your adventures or to learn more about fishing?
Probably the easiest way to find me is through YouTube, which is basically the channel is called Aaron Hunt at this point. If you search for Aaron Hunt Fishing, you'll also find it very quickly. My website for fishing is aaronhunt.net. So those are probably the best ways to contact me. I have other social media channels, but honestly, I don't use them all that much. YouTube is my home, and the blog is where I do the rest of the stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you for your time today, Aaron. This has been inspirational. I just love your story and the passion behind what you're doing. I wish you the best of luck in the future.
Thanks, Greg. I've been a fan of what you've been doing for several years now, and so it's nice to finally be able to connect and talk about things that people might be able to do after they turn 50. So,
thank you. Aaron Hunt's story is a great reminder that life after 50 is not about slowing down, but about realigning with who you really are. For Aaron, meaning and purpose come from freedom and reconnecting with what he has always loved, which was fishing. Doing that allowed him to create a life that allows him to share his experiences with others. Fishing may be the foundation of what he does, but the deeper purpose is about living intentionally, inspiring others, and proving that you can design a life on your own terms. Along the way, Aaron has found a way to blend his passion with creativity to build an income without falling back into the trap of building another job. If you'd like to follow Aaron's journey, the best place to connect with him is on his YouTube fishing channel. You can also learn more by visiting his website at www.aaronhunt.net. If you've ever wondered whether it's too late to pursue something you love, Aaron's story makes it clear that today may actually be the perfect time to start. That's all for this week's show. If you'd like to start living a more meaningful life, I encourage you to download our free guide to finding purpose, which is available at www.forwardfrom50.com. I'll have another inspirational interview on the next episode of the Forward from 50 podcast. Thanks for listening, and if you like this show, please consider leaving a review wherever you download the episodes.